Some notable moves, but Guy, it's interesting because you go from the month of October where tech was the worst performing sector and you move into November and how quickly things changed.
It felt like, I mean, first of the month, asset allocation, and I'm not making light of it. I think that's a lot of what's going on, but tech clearly was a performer. Simon would have mentioned that. Great call. Microsoft, the stock that performed well. Intel, to me, was the most interesting one, finally catching a bounce for no apparent reason. But in terms of the broader market, you know, here we are again at 14.25, give or take. That was support on the way down a couple times. It's resistance on the way up, and here we are right now. My inclination is to fade this move. I think we're going to know a lot more, obviously, by 12 to 13 hours from now.
You mentioned Intel, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index. The stock's up more than 3%. It's almost as if people forgot about the forecast for the demise of the PC and said, you know what, month of November, we're going to go in. They're cheap. They're beaten down, and that's where the value is at this point.
Yeah, we've seen a big rotation trade, and I'd say the most encouraging aspect of what's happened in the market over the last 2 weeks is the fact that we lost the leaders, Google, Apple, and Amazon, but in their place, we've seen Intel, Microsoft. We saw the industrials very strong today. So we've seen rotation that actually hasn't hurt the market even as the leaders have gotten hit, which I think is a positive sign.
Another really strong retail. That was sort of surprising, especially since, you maybe could have seen some hiding of what they think will be the results of Sandy. We didn't see that, though. Very strong across the board.
Simon, were you buying tech today?
Yeah, I mean, we were still adding on Microsoft. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Yeah, but we're kind of making the move out of the staples, which we think are overpriced right here, and moving more into the cyclicals. So the technology here is a big part of that.
Yeah, what were you seeing in the options pits, Ennis? I'm just curious in terms of technology.
So it was a quieter day, again, second straight day that it's been somewhat quiet, but we saw more call buying. So actually there was a lot of activity in Bank of America was the most active name in technology. Microsoft and Intel were the two active names. And the rally surprised me, but I do think it's encouraging that it's different names leading us without the big leaders.
Right. Let's zero in on Microsoft here, up more than 3% in the past 2 days. Simon Baker down here on the desk called the trade last week. In fact, it's up more than 5% since that call was made. So, Simon, you taking some profits at this point?
No, I think as I was mentioning, we're adding on it, Melissa. I mean, Microsoft is really underestimated here. I mean, it's a really strong product cycle going on here. There was a developers conference earlier this week. They gave out the tablets, gave out the iPhones, and the feedback is really positive. They got 400,000 users. Compare that to 150,000 in terms of developers on the iPhone side. 1.5 million people a day are upgrading on the Windows 8. I think it's going to surprise a lot of people and come up to holiday season. I think it's going to be a winner, so we're still very much long and adding to our position here.
Mike, where are you, where are you on Microsoft? Because Steve Ballmer all this week from that developers conference out with a lot of bullish sort of updates on how many people were upgrading to Windows 8. And we also had this bullish Morgan Stanley note out today saying that on the upside, the bullish scenario would be for Microsoft to hit $44 a share, which would be more than a 30% increase from where it stands right now. $37 is a price target there. But what were you seeing today?
Yeah, well, the top three most active options were all calls on Microsoft. So I think the options market, despite what Ennis referenced earlier, the fact that options volume at just under 15 million contracts was a little lighter than the 30-day moving average, but certainly better than yesterday. Microsoft was sort of range-bound for a while, right? So at one point I was even thinking about selling strangles on the name, but I will say that if I had to favor a direction, it would definitely be to the upside. I actually have also been looking at doing the Windows 8 upgrade myself and even looking at their tablet. I think that they have such an existing strong base, and the evaluation really was not that expensive even to begin with. If we're starting to see that rotation on the product side, it could be a compelling story.
But the question I always come to, Karen, is can you be a believer in Microsoft and still believe that PCs are in a secular decline at this point?
I think yes. I mean, they are in a secular decline. We know that for sure. I mean, I agree the valuation is cheap here. I don't know if it will ever get fairly valued. That 44 I see as just pie in the sky. As a long-suffering shareholder, I'd be delighted if we make it halfway to there. But at this valuation, and I know everyone's like, you can't count the cash, but maybe they do something with that cash. Maybe we see some sort of dividend.
Not stupid.
Yeah, something not stupid. There you go.
I think
that's good thinking there, Harvard girl. Something not stupid.
There might even be a special dividend between now and year end. I mean, got $60 billion in cash over there in Ireland. So
and an uncertain future dividend tax rate. So maybe.
In terms of range-bound, Guy, above 30, that hasn't been the case for a long time.
Now, and to answer your, I think the performance of the stock is probably priced in this PC decline. So, and I think Microsoft is diversified enough where the stock should be higher based on some of the other businesses they're involved in. So I'm in the Simon Baker camp. we've been in that camp for a while. I still think you're not going to get buried on the downside. We've said that a number of times, and I still think there's some significant upside here. It's a stock you can own and sort of hang out in.
Well, tech may have led the rally today, but there was one stock that was left behind, and that is Apple. It closed essentially flat on the day, even though the Nasdaq managed to inch higher, 1.4% gain, in fact. And it seems like the optics on Apple is everything is bad news unless it's really going to, knock the socks off.
I think today is a great demonstration of the ownership in a name matters for the name going forward. So for Apple, for example, I think everyone's on that bus. Everyone's gotten on that bus over the last 2 years. In contrast, you have names like Intel or Microsoft that have been thrown to the wayside, and as a result, you have far more investors that need to buy those stocks on a rally than that need to buy Apple. There's far more sellers there.
Yeah, I think that Scott Forster leaving is a big deal. The more you look into it, I mean, this last upgrade of the iPhone, it wasn't revolutionary, it was evolutionary. And Scott, he had 155 patents outstanding. Either came in as 55, and it's a consumer company. They've got to keep coming revolutionized. So I think it's a really interesting point right now.
One point I'd add to that is, strategically speaking, this is a huge departure in terms of what Cook is doing here, because in '97, when Jobs got online, he said, look, we're going to have one good product in each product area, and the most recent announcement is a huge departure from that. It's basically saying we're going to go back to being a potpourri company in each product area, and I think it's concerning to shareholders.
In terms of trading, and I know Jim Cramer talks on the show in the morning a lot about this is the stock you don't trade and you own as an investment. With that understood, if you're looking to trade this stock, and we've talked about this level a number of times, it held 610 on the downside a few times. On the way back up, if you notice, that's where it stopped and traded back down from. So I would use sort of 610 as a pivot to sort of get back into stock. And on the downside, I think you're looking for an entry point. I'm not saying it's going to go there, but this 575 level I think people have talked about.
So it's got to prove itself to 610.
So I think, 575 if it dips, I think that's where you get in. 610, I think a close above 610, it breaks out again towards the upside.
Karen, you mentioned the lack of visibility in terms of a big new product category. Is that still a concern? Do you think that's what's holding the stock back?
I think there's some of that, it's just going to be what's next. Mm-hmm. And so it's, really gets no respect, no love on the valuation side at all.
All right, let's get back to the markets here.